Crocodiles do not swim here. Crocodiles do not swim here. This example is a little silly and yes, a tad hyperbolic, yet it remains one of my personal favorites. It highlights so well and so simply how the same words can send a different message depending on the reader. And this discussion remains very relevant to us in Flesh and Blood, not only in how we as players interpret our cards and rulings, but also in how we represent ourselves on social media. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Read the card explains the card. A common statement on our games, and while often true, has over time unfortunately become a bit of a weapon with which to scold new players. Because of course, we all know that reading the card explains how the card functions, until of course, it doesn't. Hey there, my fab friends, and welcome back to Dice Commando and the 500th, that's right, 500th episode of Go Again, a fabulous cast here on Dice Commando. You heard that right. To mark this milestone, I wanted to do it in true Andrew fashion, talk just a little bit about life alongside, of course, the game that we love. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank my partners in FaB, Travis over at FaB Foundry, an awesome FaB-focused LGS, success story in his own right, hosting the Calling here in November in Portland, obviously my partner in the Commoner Crawl as well. And of course to Gongai Games, the vehicle by which I'm actually able to bring Flesh and Blood to the physical community. And of course, my DC team members, right down there, and especially to those since the beginning, thank you. And also to those watching, thank you. Now, today's topic isn't exactly a new one here on the channel. We've had words matter type discussions before, focusing on specific cards or specific topics. But this time we're going to use some Flesh and Blood examples to launch our discussion into an arguably more important and yes, unfortunately, certainly time relevant topic, how our words on social media should be written such that there's no room for interpretation, and how the words we use and the way we use them represent us as people. Now you can see that I do have this in PTI style. That's to keep me on track as I go through this. But you can see from the outline what we're going to do is we're going to start with some Flesh and Blood examples and then transition into the discussion. Now, one of the more recent examples we've had in Flesh and Blood was the Heavy Hitters card, Down But Not Out. Now, I did do a talk about this, kind of clarifying the ruling in one of the New Player in Old 2 series. But functionally, this card was intended such that you had to satisfy all three conditions independently. Okay, so when this attacks a hero, if you have less health and you control fewer equipment and tokens than them, right? Less health and fewer equipment and tokens, then you get to do the thing, right? But with the way it's written, it reads that you have to have less health and control fewer equipment and tokens, right? So again, I don't want to go too deep into it. We've rehashed it. Everyone's understand that it could have been written differently. Like you see there on the right, when this attacks a hero, if you have less health, comma, control fewer equipment, comma, and control fewer tokens than them, then it does the thing, right? So it could have been written better and made it more clear. Now, again, we have the ruling, we know how it works, and that's fine, so we can move forward. We also have one of the first examples we used to talk about this, which was Light It Up. So Light It Up as written today and published is, if Light It Up was fused, it gains if this hits a hero, deal 1 damage to them for each equipment they control. Now, the actual ruling is that it deals that as a packet of damage instead of instances of 1 for each equipment. So how it really should have been written was, if Light It Up was fused, it gains if this hits a hero, deal damage to them equal to the number of equipment they control. Now again, we've seen the release notes, we've seen the clarification, we know how it works, so all is well and good, but we have to acknowledge that this was not written on the card the way that it actually works from a proper English standpoint. Okay. Now, both of those that we just looked at were examples of where it is written from a proper English standpoint incorrectly. Okay. Now, again, we have the clarification. It's fine. We can move on. So those are two examples of when it was just written wrong and didn't say what it was trying to say. Now, what we're going to move into next for Luminaris and Dorinthea are two instances of where it was written correctly, but actions could have been taken to make it more clear so that there was the removal of room for interpretation. Okay, so Luminaris Celestial Fury, as written today, Once per turn instant for 2, target angel attack or action card with Herald in the name gets go again. Okay, so it is very clear, if you actually read this from a proper English standpoint, what this does. However, I contend that if it had been written slightly differently, so once per turn instant for 2, target attack action card with Herald in the name or target angel attack gains go again. Slight change, but it would have left less room for misinterpretation of how this card was intended to work. Again, LSS did not do anything wrong in this case, but a slight changing of wording could have removed any potential for confusion. And as if you were saying, well, but that was the way it was written, that it didn't need done. LSS has actually demonstrated to us their willingness and ability to do this, and I applaud it, right? The original way that Dorinthea was written on your young version was when your weapon, once per turn effect, of course, when your weapon hits, you can attack additional time with that weapon this turn. Now, in the very early days of the game, and honestly probably still today as new players pick it up if they do try her, it was not super clear to folks that you had to have the action point with which to do it. A lot of folks are reading this to interpret it that you could swing your weapon a second time. Obviously, we know that's not how it works, but you can understand how someone might get there. And what LSS did with the next release of Dorinthea, as you can see there on the right, is they just added the clarification text. Did it need to be added? No, it did not. But they had the room to do it. And they took the effort to just add clarification, add an extra statement that didn't technically need to be there, but they added it to make it clear. And again, I applaud that. So with the examples that we just went through from the flesh and blood side, what I really want to paint the room for, or what I really want to paint the situation for is this, right? Sometimes you write something, it doesn't come across the way you wanted it to. Sometimes you write thing and you are saying from your heart or from your soul what you believe you're saying, but there's room for interpretation to be taken a different way. And sometimes, even though you're saying the right thing and there's no other way to be taken it, sometimes it doesn't hurt to throw in that extra, if you have the room in your 220 tweet or whatever it may be, there's no reason not to take the extra steps with which to clarify. Because see, the cards we just talked about and Legend Story Studios have a distinct advantage over us. They can print a revision, issue an errata, publish a clarification in their release notes. And they can do that over and over and over again until it's right, or they can even change it as times change. But you, us as individuals, we do not have that luxury, especially in a world full of people who are hungry to take us down. Because the reality of our world, especially on social media, is that our society gains energy through other people's failure or missteps. I don't know when it happened, but at some point in the last 2 decades, maybe more, maybe less, Western culture became one in which we gain joy from other people's missteps. So much so that we'll distort and even take out of context statements and actions with which to create drama.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
So yeah, whereas LSS can issue an errata, your retraction tweet, no matter when it comes, is too late. Your clarification post, well, that wasn't the one that was retweeted 1,000 times. And your statement, it will certainly be taken out of context if it can be. Yes, it does seem that at times we live in our own technology-fueled version of the Salem witch trials. So let's talk about how to approach this stuff so we don't get burned, at least in the proverbial state. All right, now, one of the things that I enjoy showing to folks that I talk to either through classes or in training or whatever it may be is kind of another hyperbolic example of watch for falling rocks, the very familiar sign that many of us have likely seen driving across the country, whatever it may be. Watch for falling rocks. Street signs are always such a great example for this. What we see here is someone who is following the directions. They were told to watch for falling rocks. Hey, I see one. Now to us, we're like, well, obviously that's not what the sign meant. But think about it. They are doing what they were being told to do. And that's where the next thing comes from. And this has been one of my great learnings as a father, enjoying interacting with toddlers and seeing how others interact with them. One of the things that my wife consistently does and continues to do to this day is she'll ask my son, hey, would you like to go take a bath? What does my son say? Hells to the no, I don't want to go take a bath. Would you like to go do this? No, I don't want to. Instead of just saying, it's bath time. We are going to go take a bath, or whatever it may be, right? So again, bringing the dad stories and stuff into that, but I really think it's relevant for a lot of this discussion. Sometimes, and to be very clear here, so that I'm not being misinterpreted, I'm not saying that the people reading your tweets are toddlers, but I am saying that if you consider that you're talking to them as if they are, in that fashion that I just meant, sometimes it probably will help you be more successful, whether it be a tweet, a comment on a YouTube video, on Facebook, whatever. And you know what? This probably translates to sending emails in your professional life as well. I'm not saying treat your coworkers like toddlers, but if giving directions or asking for something or giving instructions, sometimes thinking about as if you were doing that to a toddler, I think actually is beneficial, right? And it's not meant in an insulting way. It's meant as to take away the option for interpretation, for them to make their own decisions, and to insert their own responses in there. Again, do you want to go take out the garbage, Andrew? No, I don't. I'm going to do it because I understand the garbage needs taken out, but I don't want to. Are you asking me to take out the garbage, or are you asking me if I want to go take out the garbage, right? They're two very different questions in how you ask them. Your intention was the same, but how I interpret it as a person is different, okay? And then the next part of this is, especially on the Twitters, space and time is your nemesis. You only have, 220 characters with which to convey your message. That doesn't give you a lot of room for the Dorinthea clarification example. But I think the thing that screws most of us most on the Twitters is the fact that speed is interpreted to matter. Who can get that comment in first? You might get the more likes. Might get the more views. You get that dopamine hit of making your comment and then seeing that little red notifications button or pink notifications button, whatever it is, turn to the bell or whatever, right? Oh, somebody cares what I have to say, right? That hurts us in that you have to just and get it out there, right? And if you think that the platforms aren't enjoying that, well, you're wrong. They are fueled off of stuff like that, right? To get the interaction and all that. Okay. So make sure that you're taking the time to get a coherent thought. Sometimes it does help, right? This is a rule with emails a lot. Write the email, right? If you're writing off, not like an easy email, but if you're writing like a, hey, you have failed my expectations or something like that email, write the email. If you're heated, take a walk around, come back. Sometimes the act of writing the email or writing the tweet or whatever is actually the therapy that you needed. And then you can start over and write it in a better way, such that you can either convey your message, take the emotion out of it, or whatever it may need to be, right? And again, I want to be very clear that even in our hearts, sometimes we mean the best, but the way that we write it leaves room for others with which to interpret it a different way and can think very poorly of us. To that end, I want to throw up an example that happened to me a couple months ago on the Twitters. I saw a tweet from doesn't matter who, but here is the comment. The biggest downside is that all of the podcasts on Twitter constantly talking about Kano, and not a single person who has anything bad to say about it has any clue what they're talking about. Now, I believe that in their heart, this person was really just saying, hey, Kano is not a problem. You shouldn't be hating on Kano. I believe that in their heart, that's what they meant. However, as I posted back, there is really no other, if you read that post, there's really no other way to take that other than anyone who thinks Kano is a problem doesn't have any idea what they're talking about, aka anyone who doesn't like Kano is dumb, or at least has a lack of understanding, right? That is the way that this reads. Now, again, I don't believe that that's ultimately what this person meant, right? But that's not good, right? And I have my own story about that, right? Back in my Star Wars Destiny days, we were talking about the person who always comes and spikes the tournament. What we would do is we would take them out, take them aside or whatever, and talk to them like, hey, this is hurting the community, blah, blah, blah. I have a chat with them. What I said on the video was, we'll have a parking lot chat with them, which was not what I meant. I meant that portion, but I meant we'll pull them aside afterwards away from people in the parking lot, but that was interpreted by certain factions of the community that I was going to take people out in the parking lot and have a fight with them, right? In my heart, I did not mean that, but I actually understand and acknowledge why they could have taken, I think they were probably pushing it a little too far just to, again, get attention on social media, but I think that's my point, right? So I used an example from one side. I used my own personal example to really highlight and hopefully show that, just because you mean something doesn't mean that that's how other people are going to take it. So you really have to double down and make sure that what you're saying is not going to, has no room for misinterpretation, right? And again, crocodiles do not swim here. Crocodiles do not swim here. It's safe. Crocodiles do not swim here. It's not safe. Crocodiles don't swim here. Now I'm just telling crocodiles to not swim there. Why do they care if they can swim there or not, right? Again, hyperbolic example, but I think very straightforward to what we're talking about. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about, the thing that triggers me personally the most is when I see two things in conversations. Full stop. Period. If you are ever responding to someone or you're in a part of a conversation, it's like, this is the answer, period. That is saying, I'm not validating any other opinion. What you're really, I believe that people, when they say that, they're trying to say, this is ultimately what I believe, and I'm not going to budge on it. When, functionally, why are you even having the conversation then? Because you're talking with people who you believe are just wrong and cannot be swayed. What's the point of having a conversation, right? Full stop and period. If you use those in conversations, very, very, very poor. It's just not having a conversation. So what's the point, right? And all it's going to do is lead to a fight and probably lead you to, at some point, respond too quickly on Twitter and get yourself into trouble. And again, full stop and period, they're just examples and signposts on this way to what I'm trying to say. So anyway, I'll cap the conversation off there. I'm not, certainly 100% not innocent in all of this, right? I've had many, many, many moons, 42 years almost 42 years with which to learn this, although probably only about 25 on the social medias and email and stuff. But either way, right? One of the passions that I have as a manager, as a leader, and as an educator is getting folks to understand the extra work that's put in to clarify, even if you don't believe it's needed, is oftentimes very valuable. Now, I usually do that from a procedure standpoint or a checklist standpoint or a learning standpoint, but I'm seeing it very much apply to the way that we as Flesh and Blood players specifically are interacting with each other right now. And I very much champion all of you as people who have made it through this entire cast at this point to really sit down, take that time, and see how that makes you at least appear to be a better person to the others around you. So with that said, we're going to end episode 500. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I'd love to see a comment below telling me what your favorite experience of the Dice Commando thing has been. Again, thank you all. To all my DC team folks, thank you. Thanks for watching, and go Commando.